Captain Minho Kang stood on the bridge of the Herald of Dawn and watched the stars through the viewport. They looked peaceful tonight, like tiny diamonds scattered across black velvet. He had been staring at these same stars for 20 years, and they had never looked threatening. Not once. That was about to change. Behind him, the communications officer cleared her throat. Minho turned slowly. He already knew what she was going to say. He had been expecting this message for 3 days now, ever since the attack on the Veltun station. 40,000 people had died in that attack. 40,000 civilians who had been mining ice from an asteroid when the Calreth warships arrived. "Captain, we have orders from Earth," the officer said quietly. Her name was Yunji, and she had been serving under Minho for 5 years. She looked nervous now, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the data pad. Minho walked over and took the pad from her hands. He read it twice, even though he understood it perfectly the first time. The Galactic Coalition was calling humanity to war. After 70 years of peace, after 7 decades of building friendships across the stars, someone had finally pushed too hard. "Get me Dr. Yoon," Minho said. "And Lieutenant Park, we need to talk." Dr. Hana Yoon arrived first. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. She studied alien cultures for a living, and right now she looked like someone had just told her the world was ending. Maybe they had. Lieutenant Jiwon Park came in right behind her, her military uniform crisp and neat as always. Park was young, only 29, but she carried herself like a soldier twice her age. "They want us to fight," Minho said without preamble. He handed the data pad to Hana, who read it and then passed it to Park. "The Calreth attacked our convoy yesterday. 17 crew members are dead. Earth Command says we have no choice now." Hana sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "We warned them. We told the Council what would happen if they forced us into this. Did they listen? No, they thought we were exaggerating. They thought our history files were myths and legends." Park said nothing. She just stood there, her hand resting on the pistol at her hip. She had never fired that weapon in the line of duty. Minho wondered how long that would last now. "What did the Council say when you showed them the records?" Minho asked Hana. He had not been present at that meeting. He had been here on his ship hoping desperately that the diplomats would find another way. Hana rubbed her eyes. They laughed. Counselor Thexara actually laughed at me. He said humans were soft. He said we hid behind words because we were afraid to fight. I showed him footage from World War II, from the trenches, from Hiroshima. He said it was primitive, barbaric. He said modern warfare was different, more civilized. Minho felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Civilized warfare," he repeated. "Is that what he thinks this is?" "The Calreth fight for honor," Park said quietly. "They have rules. No targeting civilians unless absolutely necessary. No chemical weapons. No attacking medical ships. They think war is like a chess game with guns." "And the Veltun?" Minho asked. "The Veltun use telepathy," Hana explained. "They fight mind to mind. It's very personal for them, very spiritual. They believe death in battle is a sacred thing. Both sides stop fighting at night to honor their dead." Minho walked back to the viewport. "They have no idea," he said softly. "They have absolutely no idea what they've just asked us to do." The meeting on Veriston Prime had happened 2 weeks ago. Ambassador Taejin Lee had been there representing Earth. He was an older man, dignified and careful with his words. He had spent his entire career building trust with alien species, convincing them that humans were peaceful, that they could be trusted. When the Calreth Dominion attacked the Veltun station, the Coalition had immediately convened an emergency session. Taejin had stood before the Council and begged them to find another way. He had explained that humanity did not want war. He had shown them Earth's history, the millions who had died in human conflicts, the weapons humans had built to destroy themselves. The Council had been unimpressed. To them, human history looked primitive and chaotic. They could not understand how a species that fought with such brutality could ever become peaceful. They assumed humans had simply become weak over time, that the old warrior spirit had died out. Counselor Thexara had been the worst. He was a Calreth, a 6-limbed insectoid with mandibles that clicked when he spoke. He had pointed one of his claws at Taejin and said, "If your kind truly understood war, you would not fear it. You would embrace it as we do. Your reluctance reveals your weakness." Taejin had tried one last time. "We are not weak," he had said. "We are careful. There is a difference. Please, I am begging you, do not force us into this conflict. We do not want to show you what we are capable of. But the Calreth had already decided. They issued an ultimatum. Either humanity would join the war effort or they would be expelled from the coalition. All trade would cease. All diplomatic relations would end. Earth would be alone again. Earth's government had deliberated for days. The decision had been agonizing. Finally, they had voted. If the Calreth attacked human ships or killed human citizens, Earth would respond. They would enter the war. The Calreth had attacked the very next day. The convoy had been carrying medical supplies to a coalition hospital. The ships were clearly marked with red crosses, the universal symbol of non-combatants. The Calreth had destroyed them anyway, perhaps to test human resolve, perhaps simply because they could. 17 people had died. Nurses, doctors, supply officers. None of them had been soldiers. And now Earth had no choice. Minho turned away from the viewport. How long until we reach the staging area? He asked. 6 hours, Park replied. The fleet is already gathering. I have never seen so many human ships in one place. You will see a lot more soon, Hana said grimly. Earth is activating the reserve fleets. Every mothballed warship, every training vessel, every ship that was built for war and then locked away when we thought we would never need them again. They are all coming back online. Minho felt tired suddenly, more tired than he had ever felt in his life. He was 42 years old. He had been in space since he was 20. He had never fired a weapon in anger. He had never wanted to. What do we tell the crew? Park asked. The truth, Minho said. We tell them that we are going to war. We tell them that we tried to avoid this. And we tell them to remember who we are. We are not monsters. We are humans. We do what we must, but we do not lose ourselves in the doing. He paused, then added quietly, and we pray that when this is over, the galaxy will still want us as friends. Hana stood up. They should have listened, she said. We told them. We really told them. They did not want to hear it. No, Minho agreed. They really did not. 6 hours later, the Herald of Dawn entered the staging area. Minho had been right. He had never seen so many ships. They hung in space like a cloud of metal, hundreds of vessels, each one carrying weapons that had not been fired in 70 years. Earth's sleeping arsenal awakened at last. Somewhere out there, the Calreth were celebrating their latest victory. They thought they had broken human resolve. They thought the war was already won. They did not know that humanity's greatest mercy had been their reluctance to fight. They were about to learn, and it would be a lesson the galaxy would never forget. The factories on Earth had been silent for 70 years. Now they roared to life like sleeping giants awakened from a long dream. In Seoul, in Delhi, in Sao Paulo, in Detroit. Massive buildings that had been making tractors and spaceships and medical equipment suddenly switched their assembly lines. Now they made weapons. General Minji Cho stood in the observation deck of the Strategic Command Center and watched the production reports scroll across her screen. Ships, missiles, armor, ammunition. The numbers climbed higher every hour. She was 58 years old and had not worn her uniform in 20 years. Now it fit her again, though it felt heavier than she remembered. Dr. Hana Yoon entered the room behind her. Hana looked exhausted. She had been traveling between Earth and the Coalition Council for 2 weeks straight, trying to explain what was about to happen. Trying to warn them even though it was too late now. How bad is it going to be? Hana asked quietly. Minji did not turn around. As bad as it needs to be, she said. The Calreth want a war. We are going to give them exactly what they asked for. They do not understand, Hana said. They think war is a game with rules. They think soldiers fight soldiers and everyone goes home at night. Then we will teach them, Minji said. That is what they wanted, is it not? They wanted to see what humans could do. They called us weak. They laughed at our warnings. She finally turned to face Hana. Do you know what the Calreth did yesterday? They broadcast the attack on our convoy. They showed it on their news networks like it was entertainment. They showed our people dying and they celebrated. Hana closed her eyes. I know, I saw it. Good, Minji said. Because I need you to remember that. When this gets ugly, and it will get ugly, I need you to remember why we are doing this. We did not start this war. We begged them not to start it. But now that it has started, we are going to finish it. The first strike came 3 days later. Captain Minho Kang led a task force of 12 ships to Karo Station, a coalition stronghold that the Calreth had been besieging for 2 weeks. The station was running out of supplies. Its shields were failing. Another day or two and it would fall. The Calreth fleet surrounding the station numbered 36 ships. They were expecting reinforcements, more coalition vessels coming to break the siege. They were not expecting humans. Minho sat in his command chair and studied the tactical display. 12 ships against 36. The odds looked bad. But Minho was not planning to fight fair. Humans had never fought fair. That was one of the first things you learned when you studied human military history. Launch the decoys, he ordered. Lieutenant Park pressed a button on her console. From the human ships, dozens of small drones shot out into space. Each drone was broadcasting false signals pretending to be a warship. To the Calreth sensors, it looked like 100 human vessels had just appeared. The Calreth fleet immediately broke formation. They scattered, trying to engage what they thought were multiple enemy groups. Their communications channels lit up with confused chatter. Their admiral was screaming orders, trying to reorganize his forces. Now, Minho said calmly. Hit them now. The real human ships came in fast and low, using the station itself as cover. They were not trying to destroy the Calreth fleet. That would take too long. Instead, they were targeting one specific ship, the command vessel where the Calreth admiral was directing the battle. Park led a boarding party. 20 human marines in powered armor, launched from a stealth shuttle that the Calreth never even saw coming. They cut through the hull of the command ship like it was made of paper. Inside, the Calreth crew fought hard, but they were not ready for humans. The Calreth fought with honor. They announced themselves before attacking. They gave warnings. They followed the rules of engagement that their species had developed over 1,000 years of warfare. The humans did not. They used smoke grenades and flashbangs. They attacked from behind, from above, from ventilation shafts. They moved in the dark like ghosts. When a Calreth soldier challenged them, they shot him before he finished speaking. It took 17 minutes to reach the bridge. The Calreth admiral was there, surrounded by his personal guard. He raised his claws and prepared to die with honor, expecting the humans to face him in single combat as the traditions demanded. Park shot him from 30 meters away. She did not even slow down. The guards died next, cut down by automatic weapons fire before they could react. The whole thing was over in seconds. Command ship is secure, Park reported over the radio, broadcasting surrender order now. Using the admiral's own communication system, the humans sent a message to the entire Calreth fleet. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Some of the Calreth ships tried to fight. They died quickly, swarmed by the human vessels that seemed to be everywhere at once. Most of the Calreth captains were smart enough to power down their weapons and wait. The siege of Caro Station was broken. Total human casualties, 3 wounded, none dead. Total Calreth casualties, 147 dead including their admiral. 12 ships destroyed, 24 captured. The coalition celebrated. They did not understand yet. To them it looked like a brilliant victory, a clever use of tactics and technology. They thought the humans had just gotten lucky. But on the Calreth homeworld, Counselor Thexera watched the battle recordings over and over again. He saw how the humans moved, how they fought, how they killed without hesitation, without honor, without mercy. For the first time, he felt something he had never felt before in battle. He felt fear. The second battle came 2 weeks later. A Calreth supply convoy was moving through neutral space, carrying food and ammunition to their frontline forces. It was protected by 8 warships and had clearance from the neutral systems it was passing through. The humans hit them anyway. They did not care about neutral space or diplomatic clearances. Vavasva. If the Calreth needed those supplies, then the humans would make sure they never arrived. The attack was brutal and efficient. Human ships appeared without warning, launched their missiles and jumped away before the Calreth could respond. The entire convoy was destroyed in less than 10 minutes. No survivors. No witnesses. Just wreckage floating in space. The neutral systems protested. They complained to the Coalition Council that humans were violating their space, ignoring their sovereignty. Ambassador Taejin Lee stood before the council and said simply, "You asked us to fight. We are fighting. If you wanted rules, you should have made peace instead." The third battle was different. The Calreth had learned from their mistakes. They stopped moving in predictable patterns. They hardened their defenses. They prepared for human tactics, so the humans changed their tactics. They stopped attacking military targets and started attacking infrastructure, power stations, water treatment plants, communications relays, nothing critical enough to kill civilians directly, but everything necessary to keep a modern civilization running. On the Calreth colony of Draxus 3, the power grid failed. Hospitals lost electricity. Food storage facilities went dark. The colony did not die, but it suffered. And the message was clear. Humans could make them suffer whenever they wanted. The coalition was starting to understand now. This was not the kind of war they were used to. This was not honorable combat between warriors. This was something else entirely. This was humans fighting the way humans had always fought, with every weapon they had, with every trick they knew, with a singular focus on winning no matter what it took. Dr. Yoon returned to Earth after 6 weeks. She met with General Cho again, this time in a bar near the command center. Both women looked older than they had at the start of the war. Both were carrying weight they had not carried before. The Velton are starting to ask questions, Hana said. They are wondering if they made a mistake inviting us into this war. Good, Minji said. Let them wonder. Let them all wonder. Maybe next time they will listen when we tell them no. Is it always going to be like this? Hana asked. This brutal? This ugly? Minji took a long drink. Yes, she said finally. Until they surrender. Until they cannot fight anymore. That is how war works, Hana. That is what we tried to tell them, but they did not want to listen. She put down her glass and looked at Hana directly. You know what the worst part is? This is not even close to how bad it could be. We are being gentle. We are holding back. If we wanted to, if we really wanted to, we could end this war in a week, but the cost would be too high. So we do it slowly, carefully, trying to minimize the damage. They see us as monsters now, Hana said quietly. Better to be seen as a monster than to be dead, Minji replied. The Calreth started this. We are going to finish it. And when it is over, maybe the galaxy will finally understand why we said no. Out in space, the war continued. Human ships hunted Calreth vessels through asteroid fields and nebulae. Human marines boarded enemy stations and fought room by room. Human engineers designed new weapons, new tactics, new ways to break the enemy's will. And slowly, steadily, the Calreth began to realize their mistake. They had challenged the wrong species. They had awakened something that should have stayed asleep. And now there was no way to put it back. The war had been going on for 6 months now, and the galaxy was starting to change. Not just the map of territories or the balance of power. Something deeper was changing. The way species looked at each other. The way they talked about conflict. The way they understood what violence really meant. Lieutenant Jiwon Park sat in the briefing room of a human carrier and listened to the mission parameters. Around her, 24 Marines waited in silence. They all knew what was coming. They had done this before. The target was a weapons facility on Draxus 4, a small moon orbiting a gas giant deep in Calreth territory. Intelligence reports said the facility was developing something big, something that could change the course of the war. Park's team had to go in, find out what it was, and destroy it. Questions? Park asked when the briefing ended. A young Marine raised his hand. His name was Doyun, and this was his 3rd mission. Lieutenant, are we expecting civilians? It is a military facility, Park said. But yes, there may be workers, scientists, support staff. Rules of engagement are clear. We do not fire on anyone who is not armed and does not pose a threat. Do-hyun nodded. Park saw the relief in his eyes. The humans were winning this war, but they were trying very hard not to lose themselves in the process. Every briefing included those rules. Every mission started with a reminder that they were still human, still bound by conscience and law. The insertion went smoothly. They came in during a meteor shower that masked their approach. The facility's shields were down for maintenance, a piece of information that human intelligence had worked 3 weeks to acquire. Park's team landed on the surface and entered through a service tunnel. Inside, the facility was larger than they expected. Kilometers of corridors and laboratories all carved into the moon's rock. They moved quietly, avoiding patrols, hacking security systems. It took 2 hours to reach the main research lab. What they found there made Park's blood run cold. The weapon was a planet killer. Not a metaphor or an exaggeration, an actual device designed to destroy entire worlds. The schematics showed how it worked, drilling into a planet's core and triggering a chain reaction that would tear the planet apart from the inside. And the target list was right there on the screen. 15 planets, Coalition worlds. The Velton homeworld was first on the list. Oh God, one of the Marines whispered. They were going to kill billions. Park downloaded everything. Every file, every schematic, every piece of data. Then she set the charges and led her team out. They were halfway back to their shuttle when the alarms went off. The facility's security had finally detected them. Calreth soldiers poured into the corridors, cutting off the escape route. Park's team fought their way through room by room, corridor by corridor. 3 Marines died in that fight. Do-hyun was one of them, shot protecting a wounded teammate. They made it to the shuttle with seconds to spare. As they lifted off, the charges detonated. The facility disappeared in a series of massive explosions that shook the entire moon. 2,000 Calreth died in those explosions. Scientists, soldiers, workers. Park told herself it was necessary. They had been building a doomsday weapon. But she still saw their faces in her dreams. When Park's report reached the Coalition Council, everything changed. The Veltun delegation, who had been growing increasingly uncomfortable with human warfare methods, suddenly understood. The Calreth had not been fighting for territory or resources. They had been preparing genocide. Ambassador Lyranth of the Velton stood before the council and spoke with tears streaming down his face. "We questioned the humans," he said. "We called them brutal. We said they fought without honor. But they knew. They saw what we could not see. They understood that this was not a war, it was survival, and they fought accordingly. The political tide shifted. Species that had been neutral now joined the coalition. Resources that had been withheld now flowed freely to the war effort. And most importantly, no one questioned human methods anymore. But for the humans, the discovery brought no joy. Dr. Hana Yoon read the report in her office on Earth and wept. Not because she was surprised. She had studied the Calreth for years. She had seen the warning signs. But knowing and seeing were different things. She called Captain Minho Kang. He was in deep space, commanding a fleet that was preparing for the final push toward the Calreth homeworld. When his face appeared on her screen, she saw how much he had aged. 6 months of war had put years on him. "You saw the report?" Hana asked. "I saw it," Minho said. 15 planets, 40 billion people. They were really going to do it. "Does it make it easier?" Hana asked. "Knowing what they were planning?" Minho was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "It does not make it easier. It makes it necessary. There is a difference." The final offensive began 3 weeks later. The target was Caltharian Prime, the Calreth homeworld. It was the most heavily defended planet in their empire, protected by orbital fortresses and a fleet of 200 warships. The humans brought 400 ships. They did not try to be clever this time. They did not use tricks or deception. They just came straight on, wave after wave, absorbing losses and pressing forward. The battle lasted 6 weeks. It was the longest continuous engagement in galactic history. The Calreth fought with desperate courage, knowing they were defending their homeworld. But courage was not enough. The humans had more ships, more ammunition, more everything, and they never stopped coming. Captain Kang led the assault on the orbital fortresses. His ship took heavy damage in the first week, but he refused to pull back. He stayed in the fight, directing his forces, coordinating with other captains, making sure every attack counted. On the ground, human Marines fought Calreth soldiers in the streets of their capital city. It was brutal, close-quarters combat. Buildings collapsed. Fires raged. But slowly, block by block, the humans advanced. General Minji Cho commanded the ground assault from orbit. She watched the battle feeds and made decisions that she knew would haunt her forever. Send more troops here. Bomb this building. Evacuate these civilians. Every choice meant someone lived or died. By the end of the 6th week, the Calreth High Council had no choice. Their fleet was destroyed. Their capital was surrounded. Their people were dying. They sent a message asking for terms of surrender. Captain Kang went to the surface to accept the surrender. He walked into the Calreth throne room, a massive chamber that had once been beautiful but was now scarred by weapons fire. The High Council waited for him there, 8 Calreth leaders who had ruled an empire and now had nothing left. Councillor Thexera was among them, the same Calreth who had mocked humanity at the start of the war, who had called them weak, who had laughed at their warnings. He did not look arrogant now. He looked broken. Thexera knelt before Minho. It was a gesture of complete submission, something Calreth only did before their gods. "We understand now," Thexara said, his mandibles clicking softly. You were not weak. You were merciful. You tried to spare us from this. We were fools not to listen. Minho looked down at him. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Just exhaustion and sadness. The war is over, he said. We will discuss terms. But first I need to know one thing. Why? Why did you build that weapon? What were you thinking? Thexara looked up at him. We thought we were strong, he said. We thought we were the apex. We thought no one could challenge us. We were wrong. About everything. The surrender was signed that day. The war was over. Humanity had won. But standing in that ruined throne room, surrounded by the wreckage of a civilization that had pushed too hard, Minho Kang did not feel like a winner. He just felt tired. Outside, human soldiers celebrated. Ships fired salutes into the sky. On Earth, people danced in the streets. The war was over. They had survived. But the humans who had fought, who had seen what war really was, they did not celebrate. They just sat quietly and tried to remember who they used to be. The war ended on a Tuesday. That was what people remembered later. The strange, mundane quality of it. 6 months of horror and death, and it ended on an ordinary Tuesday. Afternoon, Dr. Hana Yoon stood in her office at the Seoul Institute for Xenoanthropology and watched the news feeds from Caltharian Prime. The images showed Calreth citizens emerging from shelters, blinking in the sunlight, trying to understand that they had survived. Human soldiers were handing out food and water. Medical teams were setting up field hospitals. It was strange how quickly war turned into something else. Yesterday, those same soldiers had been fighting for every street corner. Today, they were helping rebuild. Hana supposed that was very human. To destroy and to heal with equal efficiency. Her assistant knocked on the door. Dr. Yoon? The council is calling. They want to schedule a formal ceremony. Hana nodded. Tell them I will attend, but I need a few days. There is something I have to do first. She traveled to the memorial wall in Seoul, a long black stone structure that listed the names of everyone who had died in the war, 17 names from that first convoy. Then more and more as the war progressed. 342 names in total. Not many, compared to the ancient wars of human history. But each one was a person who would never go home. Hana placed her hand on the cold stone. She thought about Do Hyun, the young Marine who had died on Draxus 4. She had read his file. 23 years old. Wanted to be a teacher after his service ended. Now he was just a name on a wall. We won, she whispered to the stone. I hope it was worth it. I hope you think it was worth it. The stone offered no answer. Captain Minho Kang returned to Earth 3 weeks after the surrender. His ship docked at the orbital station, and he took a shuttle down to the surface. There were crowds waiting to greet him, cameras and reporters and people cheering. Hero of humanity, the captain who had broken the siege of Cairo Station, the man who had accepted the Calreth surrender. Minho smiled and waved because that was what was expected. But inside he felt hollow. He kept seeing that throne room, kept seeing Thexara kneeling before him, kept seeing the ruined city outside the windows. That night, he tried to sleep in his own bed for the first time in 6 months. He could not. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw faces. Calreth soldiers he had killed, human crew members who had died under his command, civilians caught in crossfire. At 3 in the morning, he gave up and went for a walk. The city was quiet at this hour, peaceful. He walked to the harbor and sat on a bench watching the water and trying to remember what peace felt like. Someone sat down next to him. It was General Minji Cho, also unable to sleep apparently. They sat in silence for a long time. 2 soldiers who had done what was necessary and were now trying to live with it. Does it get easier? Minho asked finally. No, Minji said, but you learn to carry it. That is all we can do. Carry it and keep going. Lieutenant Ji-won Park did not return to active duty. She submitted her resignation 2 days after the war ended. Her commanding officer tried to talk her out of it, told her she was a hero, told her Earth needed soldiers like her. But Park just shook her head. I joined to protect people, she said. And I did protect people. But I also killed people. A lot of people. I need time to figure out if I am still the person I thought I was. She moved to a small town in the mountains, far from cities and crowds. She got a job teaching self-defense at a community center. She worked in her garden. She tried to find peace in simple things. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes she could go whole days without thinking about the war. But then night would come, and she would dream of the research facility, of the Marines who had died under her command, of the Calreth scientists she had killed. One evening, a young veteran came to her class. He had been a Marine, too, had fought in the ground assault on Caltherian Prime. After class, they talked. He told her he was having nightmares. He told her he did not know how to be a civilian again. Park listened and realized she was not alone. There were hundreds of veterans struggling with the same things. Maybe thousands. They had done what their world asked of them, and now they were trying to find their way back to normal life. That was when Park decided to start the support group. She reached out to other veterans, created a safe space where they could talk about what they had experienced. It started with 10 people meeting in her living room. Within a year, it grew to 50 chapters across Earth. The ceremony on Veriston Prime happened 2 months after the war ended. Every species in the coalition sent representatives. The crystal amphitheater was filled with thousands of beings, all gathered to mark the end of the conflict. Ambassador Taejin Lee stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. He saw Velton and Krell and Archons. He saw reformed Calreth, the new government that had replaced the War Council. He saw humans, his own people, many of them wearing military uniforms with medals they had never wanted to earn. The High Council had prepared a long speech thanking humanity for their service. But when the time came, the council speaker set aside his notes. Instead, he said simply, "We are sorry. We did not listen. We forced you into a choice you tried desperately to avoid. We saw your reluctance as weakness. We understand now that it was wisdom. We apologize to you, to your dead, and to the memory of the peace we shattered." The amphitheater fell silent. Then the Velton delegation stood. Then the Krell. Then everyone, species after species, all rising to their feet in a gesture of respect and sorrow. Taejin felt tears on his face. He had not cried during the war. He had not cried when he received reports of casualties. But now, hearing the apology that came too late, he could not stop the tears. When he stepped to the podium to respond, his voice was steady despite the tears. "We are not proud of what we did," he said. "We are proud we stopped when it was over. That is the difference between us and the monsters we fought. We knew when to stop. We remembered who we were." After the ceremony, a monument was unveiled. It stood in the center of the amphitheater, a tall spire of dark stone with words carved in every major language of the coalition. The inscription read, "To those who answered the call they never wanted. May we never forget what they sacrificed. May we never again need what they gave." The Kang Accords were signed a week later. Named after Captain Minho Kang, the Accords established new rules for the coalition. Humanity would never again be compelled to fight unless Earth itself faced direct threat. In return, humanity agreed to share their knowledge of conflict resolution and defensive strategy. The Accords also established the Institute for War Studies, a research center dedicated to understanding conflict and preventing future wars. Dr. Hana Yoon became its first director. Her first project was a comprehensive history of the war, documenting everything that had happened so that future generations would understand. She called it the burden of history. In it, she explained how humanity's violent past had shaped their present, how 10,000 years of war had taught them the true cost of violence, how their reluctance to fight came not from weakness but from hard-won wisdom. The book became required reading in coalition academies. Young cadets of every species studied it, learning from humanity's mistakes and triumphs. Some found it disturbing, others found it enlightening. All of them came away with a deeper understanding of what war really meant. General Minji Cho retired again, this time for good. She returned to her small apartment in Seoul, hung up her uniform, and tried to become a civilian. She took up painting, something she had loved as a young woman but had abandoned when she joined the military. Her paintings were dark at first, full of shadows and harsh lines. But slowly, over months and years, they began to change. Color crept in. Light appeared. She was healing slowly, one brushstroke at a time. One day, Dr. Yoon came to visit her. They sat in Minji's studio drinking tea and looking at the paintings on the walls. "Do you think they will remember?" Hana asked. "In 50 years, in 100? Will they remember why we said no?" Minji picked up her brush and studied it. "They will forget," she said. "Sentients always forget. That is how peace lasts. If everyone remembered every war, every hurt, no one would ever forgive anything. Then what was the point? Hana asked. The point, Minji said, is that we will remember. Us. The ones who fought. The ones who saw. We will remember, and we will teach, and we will make sure that if the galaxy ever forgets and asks again, there will be humans who can say no, humans who understand the cost. She dipped her brush in paint and returned to her canvas. That is our burden now. Not to fight, not to win, just to remember. And so the galaxy moved forward. The war fleets were mothballed again, stored in silent orbits around distant moons. The factories that had made weapons returned to making tools and machines. Earth became a center of art and culture and diplomacy once more. But the humans who had fought never truly left the war behind. They carried it with them, a weight they would bear for the rest of their lives. Some days it was light. Some days it was crushing. But they carried it because that was what soldiers did. They carried the burden so others would not have to. 50 years had passed since the war ended. Half a century of peace, of rebuilding, of slowly learning to trust again. The galaxy had changed in that time, as all living things must change. Captain Minho Kang had died 3 years ago at the age of 89. His funeral had been attended by leaders from every corner of the coalition. They came to honor a man who had fought when fighting was necessary and stopped when stopping was right. A simple monument marked his grave and soul with an inscription he had chosen himself. I did what I had to do. I hope you never have to. Dr. Hana Yoon was 88 now, her hair completely white, her hands shaking slightly when she held her tea. She had retired from the Institute for War Studies 5 years ago, but still taught one class each semester at the Galactic Academy. Today was the first day of that class. She stood in front of 30 students representing 15 different species. Humans, Velton, Krell, even 2 young Calrith. The students looked at her with curiosity and respect. To them, she was a living piece of history, someone who had been there when everything changed. Welcome, Hana said, her voice still strong despite her age. This is History of Galactic Conflict, Advanced Studies. We are going to talk about war, not the sanitized version you learned in basic courses. The real thing, the ugly truth of what happens when civilizations decide to solve problems with violence. She pressed a button, and the classroom lights dimmed. A holographic display appeared showing a star map from 50 years ago. This was the galaxy on the day the war began. Let me tell you a story about what happened next. Ensign Daeho Shin sat in the front row and listened carefully. He was 24 years old, a human cadet specializing in Xena relations. He had grown up hearing stories about the war, but always from a distance, always filtered through time and perspective. This was different. This was hearing it from someone who had lived it. Dr. Yoon showed them footage from the battles. Not propaganda, not edited clips, but raw combat recordings. Daeho watched human ships attacking Calreth positions. He watched Marines fighting in corridors. He watched civilians running from burning buildings. It was not glorious. It was not heroic. It was just brutal and sad. One of the Velton students raised a tentacle. Dr. Yoon, I have a question. Are humans still capable of this kind of warfare? The classroom fell silent. Everyone wanted to know the answer. Hana looked at the student for a long moment, then at Daeho, then back at the class. Yes, she said simply. We are still capable of it. The weapons still exist. The knowledge still exists. The capacity for violence is still part of who we are. But we choose not to use it. That choice, that daily decision to be better than our worst impulses, that is what makes us human. After class, Daeho approached Dr. Yoon. Ma'am, I wanted to ask you something. My grandfather fought in the war. He never talked about it much. Do you think he was ashamed? Hana considered the question carefully. Probably not ashamed, she said. But carrying something heavy. War changes people, Daeho. Your grandfather did what needed to be done, but that does not mean it was easy to live with afterward. The bravest thing he did was not fighting. It was coming home and choosing to be gentle in a world that needed gentleness. That evening, Hana took Daeho to the War Memorial Museum in Seoul. It was a massive building, filled with artifacts from the conflict, weapons, uniforms, personal items from soldiers who had fought and died. At the center of the museum stood a holographic display, and Hana led Daeho to it. This is Captain Kang's final message, Hana said. He recorded it before he died. He wanted future generations to understand. She pressed a button and the hologram flickered to life. Captain Kang appeared, older than in the war photos. His face lined with age, but his eyes still sharp. He sat in a simple chair, hands folded in his lap, and spoke directly to the camera. "If you are watching this," Kang said, "it means humanity has survived. I am glad. I hope you are living in a time of peace. I hope the galaxy has learned the lessons we paid for with so much blood." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I want you to understand something. We are not warriors by nature. We did not want to fight. We begged them not to make us fight. But when we had no choice, when survival demanded it, we did what we had to do." "The hardest part," Kang continued, "was not the fighting. It was stopping. It was putting down the weapons and remembering how to be human again. Some of us managed it. Some of us did not. Lieutenant Park spent the rest of her life helping veterans remember who they were before the war. General Cho painted until the day she died, trying to create beauty to balance the destruction she had ordered." He leaned forward slightly. "If the day comes when you have to fight, remember this. War is not the answer. War is what happens when all the answers have failed, and when the fighting is over, when the enemy has surrendered or the threat has passed, you must stop. You must remember to be human again. That is the test. Not how well you fight, but how well you stop fighting." The hologram faded. Daeho stood quietly for a moment, processing what he had heard. "He sounds sad," he said finally. "He was," Hana said. "We all were. Victory does not feel the way you think it will. It just feels like survival." They walked through the rest of the museum together. Hana showed Daeho the uniform Lieutenant Park had worn, now preserved behind glass. She showed him General Cho's paintings, a whole gallery of them, charting her journey from darkness to light. She showed him the data crystal containing every name of every person who had died in the war, human and alien alike. At the exit, there was a final display. A plaque mounted on black stone, with words written in gold letters. Daeho read them aloud. "The galaxy learned too late why humanity said, 'You really don't want this,' not because we could not fight, but because we knew what fighting would cost. Them, us, and the peace we all cherished. May we never forget." "Do you think the galaxy has learned?" Daeho asked. "Really learned?" Hana smiled sadly. "For now. But memory fades with each generation. That is why we have museums. That is why we tell stories. That is why I teach, so that when memory fades, truth remains." They stepped outside into the warm evening air. Above them, stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the galaxy went about its business. Trade ships moved between systems. Diplomats negotiated treaties. Children played in parks on 1,000 different worlds. "What happened to Lieutenant Park?" Daeho asked. "The captain's message mentioned her. She died about 10 years ago," Hana said. "Cancer. She was 79. Her veteran support network still exists. It has helped thousands of former soldiers learn to live with what they experienced. She never remarried, never had children. She said her students were her children. Do you ever regret it?" Daeho asked quietly. "Fighting the war?" Hana stopped walking. "Every day," she said. "But I do not regret that we won. The Calreth were going to commit genocide. They had to be stopped. I just wish we had found another way. I wish they had listened when we warned them." She looked up at the stars. "The galaxy is at peace now. That peace was bought with blood. Human blood, Calreth blood, blood of civilians who never asked to be part of a war. We paid a terrible price, but the alternative would have been worse." Daeho nodded slowly. He understood now why his grandfather had never talked about the war. Some experiences were too heavy to share, too painful to put into words. You could only carry them silently, until the weight became part of who you were. "Will you tell me about him?" Daeho asked. "My grandfather?" "His name was Jae-woo Shin. He was a Marine." Hana smiled. "I knew Jae-woo. Not well, but I met him a few times. He was part of the ground assault on Caltharian Prime. Brave man. Quiet. He used to volunteer at the Veterans Center after the war, helping younger soldiers adjust to civilian life. He taught me to fish," Daeho said. "Every summer we would go to the lake. He never said much, just sat there with his line in the water, peaceful. I did not understand then. I thought he was just a quiet old man, but now I see it. He was finding peace, finding quiet after so much noise." "That is a good memory," Hana said. "Hold on to it. Your grandfather fought so that you could have a galaxy where fishing by a lake was possible, where a young man could dream of being a diplomat instead of a soldier. That is what we fought for. Not glory, just the chance for normal life to continue." A month later, Daeho graduated from the academy with honors. He was assigned to the Coalition Embassy on Veriston Prime, starting his career as a junior diplomat. His first day on the job, he walked past the monument that had been erected after the war. To those who answered the call they never wanted, he stopped and placed his hand on the stone, thinking of his grandfather, of Captain Kang, of all the people who had fought so he could have this life. "Thank you," he whispered. "I will try to make it worth it." Years passed. Daiho became a skilled negotiator, helping to resolve disputes before they escalated into violence. He married a Velton diplomat named Sela, and they had 2 children who would grow up in a galaxy at peace. Dr. Hana Yoon passed away at the age of 93. Daiho attended her funeral, along with hundreds of others whose lives she had touched. They buried her next to Captain Kang, 2 old soldiers finally at rest. The galaxy continued turning. New generations grew up knowing the war only as history. Some thought the stories were exaggerated,